The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast NH. This is a podcast designed by writers for writers on the journey to being published. Joined Mandra Biscornet.
It was so healthy and nutritious.
Deborah Monk.
Can we open each podcast with a dance number?
Shelly Devlin.
It was so full of inspiration and sparkles.
Every Tuesday morning live on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to catch the podcast anytime on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. It's time to be inspired, feel empowered, and be well with the Writer's Block Podcast NH.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast. I'm Mandra.
And I'm Debbie.
Thank you for joining us here at the Writer's Block, where our mission is to inspire, empower, and to help people be well. We are streaming live on Facebook from the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe on this snowy Tuesday morning. And today on our show, we're going to be talking about the part of your book that people see first, that all-important first impression, the cover. It's so important. And joining us today to discuss how to make your book cover stand out in a sea of images is photographer and visual artist Melissa Luella Rush. Melissa is the owner of Melissa Luella Photography, based in Somerville, Mass. Her studio shines light on boudoir photography for extraordinary everyday women. In her past life, she worked as an associate media director for an advertising agency in Chicago, doing media strategy for music labels. She's been photographing for over 11 years and fell in love with boudoir photography when working for a boudoir studio in Dallas 3 years ago. That's when she made the switch of creating a career out of her passion. Her intimate portrait work celebrates sophistication, feminine qualities, and the joys and strengths of a woman. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you on our show. And can we just talk about boudoir photography for a minute? Deb, how did we end up connecting with Melissa?
Well, it was a very serendipitous meeting. Brenda, who's a great dear friend of the Writer's Block here.
Number one fan.
Yes, number one fan, and also owner of the FemBoutiqueBoston.com, her little boutique.
Her clothing line.
Yes. So she came up to me one day and said, Deb, I need to ask you a favor. And I said, well, stop right there. The answer's yes. And she's
you brave woman.
I did, but because Brenda is so supportive and just so, like, she believes in dreams and following your dreams. And so when she needs something, I said, absolutely, whatever it is. And she said, well, I've met a photographer and she's kind of new to the area and we're going to do a collaboration where she's trying to build up her portfolio and we're trying to build up ours. So we need a model. And what I interpreted that to mean is she had asked everybody else and nobody else was available. And I thought, well, okay, if I'm the best you got, then I'm the best you have. So then she sprung on me that Melissa is a boudoir photographer and that I would be expected to do a boudoir shot.
Is that in your underwear? Is that what that means? In case we have any guy listeners?
Pretty much.
It's limited clothing.
It's very limited clothing, yes. And so at the time, the only boudoir photographer that I knew of was from Sex and the City, and it was Samantha. And it was actually the exact opposite of where I am in my life, or where I was in my life a couple of years ago. I love dressing up in costume and acting and performing.
Yes, we do.
But that's very different. Putting on a costume and becoming someone else is very different than taking everything off and being, yourself. And supposedly being sexy. I thought, I just don't want to. But it was Brenda.
I think you're sexy, baby.
Well, thank you.
Aw.
So I went, with a lot of trepidation. Brenda met me. We went to Melissa's studio, and then Brenda basically abandoned me. And I thought, oh, this is, because her studio is a very intimate setting. So we did the photo shoot for the clothes first. And then I had asked Melissa ahead of time via email, we hadn't met yet, what I should bring or wear. And she said sexy lingerie, maybe she said garter belts and thongs and, and I
we are going to have a lot of male listeners today.
Well, the thing is, I just couldn't do that. I just couldn't do it. So I went into Jonathan's closet and I got one of his big white shirts. And I threw in black hose, sheer hose.
Yep.
I think it was leopard high heels, a pair of red high heels, the biggest push-up bra that Victoria's Secret offers. And when I got to Melissa, I put that on for her and I stood there and I just didn't feel. And she said, well, why don't we try this? And she took the shoes off. Why don't we try this? She took the thong off. Why don't we try this? She took the hose off. Well, she didn't, but she said, let's, that black lace doesn't look good.
Doesn't look good, yeah.
And then I ended up in just the white t-shirt and I felt so good. Like all the accoutrements of what are supposed to make you sexy, she took away from me.
Yeah.
So she took all the pressure away. And I'll tell you, I did not expect to like any of the pictures. I wasn't going to buy any of the pictures. I never even wanted to see any of the pictures. And Melissa, when she showed them to me, I actually, and I if I wasn't there, I wouldn't believe it. I actually cried when I saw the pictures because I saw who I am, not who I think I'm supposed to be, not who I'm trying to be.
Right.
I was amazed. And then Melissa's pictures have ended up on I use her as my author photo. I use her on my website. I've used her on posters, on promotional posters. I mean, I have used her stuff and I think Jonathan has one of the pictures, one of my favorite that I didn't use anywhere.
You're going to have to tell me which one it is there, dear.
Which one is the boudoir one?
I already put that one up.
Oh, okay, perfect. Right. So it was amazing. It was it was such an amazing experience that I did not want to do, that I had so much resistance to.
Yeah.
I would recommend it so much.
To do a shot
Yes.
like that. Yeah.
Melissa's amazing.
Thank you so much. And Deb, you rocked it. This is like so common. A lot of women have fears about doing, a session like this, but it's really like, I think, like what you said, it's taking the layers off of like, kind of dropping the wall and really like showing yourself very, authentic and raw and a little vulnerable. So I think that's the fear instead of like, these sexy lingeries and things like that. And you rocked it and it was such a blast.
But Melissa, that says a lot about you too, to create an atmosphere where women feel comfortable and confident enough to do that. Because the photography is one piece, but setting a stage where someone with a lot of hesitation feels comfortable to really take off those layers just says a lot about you and your ability to connect, with your clients.
I think I've always been interested in people. So whenever I meet somebody new, I find people fascinating. And so I think the focus of taking, the time to really like learn about a person for the first time, and especially, they're taking their clothes off that day. There is something about that that's like special, that like, telling them that there's this space that's like, safe for you to really express yourself intimately or, however you want. And that opens up, so much like trust from them. Mm-hmm. And then that really calms them down. And of course, we do a hair and makeup and it's a fun girls kind of like experience. But I think there is something about like getting to know a person like authentically and really interested in them that gives them so much like confidence, that lets them like say, oh, okay, I'll open up. And then that's when the images are stunning, when they really drop down that guard and then they say, this is who I really am. And it's just beautiful. I love it.
You really feel safe. Like you feel cared about. You feel completely enveloped by Melissa in that little room. You feel like this is just, the whole world is kind of shut out. It was really quite the experience. Very unexpected. Yes, and her work is just stunning. She makes everybody, I don't want to say look beautiful because that would be too cliche. You feel like you're like the woman that's on the front page of your website right now, a kind of a redhead, I think, with her head turned to the side. Like, wow. You feel like you know that woman, even though I've never met her. Yeah. I can imagine the people who do know her just see her radiance. And it isn't that it's more than, you don't see just the physicality of her. Melissa brings out, I think, for me, all the photos I've seen that she's done, she brings out the essence of the person.
She gets them to open up and then captures that on film.
She really does.
And that's where the art comes in.
Absolutely.
Being able to capture that?
Yes.
There is this moment when, of course, we have typically an hour to 90 minutes of shooting. And then there is this moment, it's very subtle, when somebody really forgets about themselves. That's when you see that that's the real them. And, they're not in their head. They're totally just like being in the here and now. And that's when, like, wow, like that, if I photograph Mandra, I'll be like, oh, that's the real Mandra. And it's like, it's a split second and you have to like capture it fast. And then that's when the images are really like raw, authentic, and just genuine, and that's the image that you saw on my website, of this woman. So yeah.
So then how did it move from that meeting to doing images that you then used on the cover of Well-Behaved Woman Coming Undone?
Which I have to tell you, Melissa, I get a lot of compliments on this cover.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
I love it.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yes, I get a lot of compliments. And so the way that happened is, so we did that photo shoot. And then maybe a year or so later, my stepfather died, which I've mentioned before. And I had this image of a video that I wanted to do because my family was so... When my stepfather died, there was kind of a fault line of my family really, really falling apart, that it had been held together with toothpicks. And so, but we weren't able, communication is not what we're good at. So there was so much going on that I couldn't talk to anybody about it. I couldn't say anything because just for a variety of reasons. And so I had this image I wanted to do. I drove by an Andover graveyard, this huge, gorgeous graveyard in Andover. And I could see the headstones with my name on it as Debbie the sister, Debbie the daughter, because my stepfather died. My father was already dead. So without a father, am I a daughter of a I still have my mother, but so I saw that and I just knew that was going to be my therapy, that I wanted to do this video. I wanted to do a dance in this graveyard. Well, I didn't know if I was going to be able to find a guy who was willing to dance in a graveyard. So I thought, well, maybe
because that's not far-fetched. I mean, I don't know who wouldn't want to dance in a graveyard with Debbie.
Well, there's a quick little story where she had an idea for climbing out of a coffin.
Oh, yeah, right.
So I tried
Please tell that.
I have a friend that shops in the cigar shop that runs a parlor.
Funeral home.
Mm-hmm. And so I approached him very gingerly and said, how do you feel about, during your off hours, we'll come in the middle of the night, whatever works. But she has this idea, and he said...
Because what I was trying to show is the death of identities, the death of certain
of that
egos.
Role.
Right,
yeah.
The death of parts of you as you're living, that parts of you are going to die. And so I wanted to show that.
He didn't care about any of that.
Yeah.
He didn't think that it was appropriate to have an alive person climbing out of one of his caskets.
Imagine.
And in the off chance that someone recognized the room or something, it's very bad for business. It wasn't good for his business. Making light of the dead. And I said, she's going to take it very serious. And he said, yeah, conversation's over.
Right. So I suppose
that plan had to get scrapped.
Yes.
And you moved on to dancing in a graveyard.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I wasn't sure I'd be able to find a guy who was willing to do it. So I thought, well, maybe I'll do still photographs to the song Cry of the Heart, which is the song that I wanted to have playing in the background. And so I reached out to Melissa and I told her, I said, this is what I want to do. And so she met me in the graveyard. And there were people, this is a very public graveyard. There were people walking around. Melissa and I don't know about, I don't think Melissa, but Melissa and I didn't even notice the people. So they had to be looking at us because I'm wearing this great big pink kind of ball gown type of dress.
Yep.
But you can see one of the photographs that she took up there where we found a headstone that simply said Father. And so I just crouched down and hugged it. And I mean, it was such a powerful day. So we took those photos. I used them. I used some of the photos. I did end up finding Misha, who did come and dance. He put on his tail suit, and I choreographed it, and we went to the graveyard and danced it. But Melissa's photographs were so stunning that I incorporated some of those into the video. So now another year goes by,
right.
Approximately, and I've hired 3 different cover artists to do the cover for Well-Behaved Woman, and they're all coming back, and they're all good, but none of them are great.
Were those photos, drawings, like what other?
They were literally.
Were you looking at?
Well, they weren't just photographers. They weren't photographers per se. They were literally book cover artists.
Okay.
So they will do either drawings or they will do photographs, whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And I hired 3 different ones. And I can't say that they didn't deliver because they did, but they all required a lot of, what do you want? And I was looking for the mood, and so I wasn't really happy. And so then Brenda again said, well, why don't you use the photos that Melissa did? And I said, I can't be on the cover of my book. Like, that's just weird, because I've never seen it done. Nobody's on the cover of their book. And so Brenda insisted, and she said, there's one photo, there was one particular one that Brenda absolutely loved, but you could see my face in that one. So
that was out.
That was out. And so I went back through the pictures, and I saw this picture, and all you can see is the bottom half of me. And so nobody knows it's me. And
Except you just told everybody.
Well, yeah, and I do have the tattoo, so if I ever need to prove it, the tattoo on my foot. And it had the mood, and I brought it to my writing group, and they said it just was full of angst and sadness, and it was perfect. But then, so now I've decided on the cover, the photograph, but then there's the fonts. So I played with that for probably a month, and I had a graphic design artist looking at it. And again, they were okay, but I wasn't happy. So I reached out to Melissa again, and I said, Melissa, I can't do the font. She did, within 24 hours, she sent me 13 samples of different fonts. And they were all really good. And I went through them, I scrolled through them slowly, and I came to this one, which is no capitals.
Right.
On the
all
title,
lowercase.
all lowercase. And
I didn't realize you did the fonts, Melissa.
She did.
Because I remember looking at some of those options.
Is there anything that you don't do, young lady?
Right.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's interested in a lot of things, I guess. And I think also the background in marketing helps, because I think sometimes, there's this creative brain wherein it's just creativity, and then the brain of, having experience.
That's me. I just want to be the creator.
Right. And I think that actually helped me figure out, like, I've asked, you so many questions, right? Like, who is your target market? So it wasn't just fonts.
No,
you had
God,
to,
no.
Figure out how is the feeling of the book? Who's your target market? Who's going to pick up the book? Even the layout of, like, the image, and then where the fonts would be and things like that. So there's a lot of, like, a little back and forth to figure out what is the best design, and, like, samples to, like, send you. So yeah.
Yeah, because I remember Shelly and I looking with the title was here.
Yep.
Your name was in different places.
Different colors.
So not only the font choice, but the placement of it. And because you got to know Deb so well through that photo shoot, I think you were in a great position to give her some really good options.
Oh, a lot. There were quite a few. There were a few that I could have been happy with, but this one the very first time I scrolled through them, I kind of just relaxed, and I just scrolled slowly, and this one is the one that appealed to me the most. Now, theoretically, your title is supposed to be bold, and especially Well-Behaved Woman Coming Undone is a pretty catchy title, so theoretically that should be bolder. And Melissa did some with it much, but there was just something so intimate and unassuming about this that I then used I used the same thing for my other book, but that I was re-releasing. So she helped. I found the photograph on this one, but Melissa also did the layout on this of the words.
The lesson here, I think, for authors that are considering getting published, whether you go with traditional publishing or self-publishing, is you need to find people in your crew that you build, your dream team, so to speak, that match your passion. So where you are, I don't have a better way of saying it, so forgive me, on the artsy-fartsy side, and you found Melissa who matches that. She's able to see things in a similar way that you see them. Maybe not the same things, but she's able to see the world in a similar light, and is able to match your intensity in that respect. So that's the thing you want to look for when you're looking for a cover artist, is maybe you're not that intense. You're intense, Deb. You need intensity in your life. But maybe someone's not that intense, so they would want somebody that's less intense, perhaps, to help them.
And Melissa's not. I don't want to.
And they don't have to be cover artists. I mean, that's the beauty of Melissa. Right. She is a visual artist that got it right.
100%. And I hope that Melissa will always be my cover artist. And I'm hoping that, if other people, if she ends up taking off as a book cover artist, I hope because I'm her first, I always get to be on the list.
Happy to. Yeah.
There was a part of me that actually thought, do I really want to do this show? Do I really want other people to find out?
Melissa.
Right. Or do I want to keep her as my secret weapon? But
yeah, your secret's out.
I do think because we have the same philosophy of finding that women and their raw honesty and their vulnerability is when they're the most beautiful. I do think because we both share that vision, I think that our work is going to be, her visual work is going to be very similar to my, written word. I think
and what you're going
think that helps.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Two of you need to do a collaboration now and have a picture book together. Dun, dun, dun.
That sounds fantastic.
That's
does
actually
sound
not a
fantastic.
bad idea at all.
You know what?
Producer
you
Jonathan.
You can stop begging. I'll be the model for the shoot. I've got an impressive collection of thongs, as you well know, Deb. So,
Lord.
I'm in.
Oh, Lord. That's not actually, that's a really interesting.
That's a great idea.
All right, don't lose
Melissa.
focus. We're still doing a show here.
Yeah.
I'm totally.
Totally up for that.
And think about the ages we could cover. We would want to find maybe in I don't know, 6 months or so, we would want to find a tiny, tiny newborn. And then, wink, wink. And then.
I don't know where we'd find that.
I don't either.
Yeah.
And then find, like a 70 or 80-year-old woman and kind of cover the gamut. And Melissa. I know you have an appointment following this, but we'll have to talk later.
That's great.
Jonathan.
I know. I have a gift. I can't help it.
You really do. Any other sort of advice or thoughts that either of you can give people for when they are, because this is sometimes the last thing that people think of. Not for Shelly. Shelly thought of her book cover.
That's true.
First.
But
and
most
then,
people don't even think about the book cover.
Exactly.
And if you're traditionally published, you don't even
get
have
a
any
say.
You
Right.
might get some say. So when Searching for Julia Stone first came out, they did do the cover and they did ask me my opinion and they did allow me to change the color. I thought the colors were off. But I didn't love it. It wasn't really what my vision for the cover was, but at that time I didn't know any better.
Right.
So, and then there's also, once you, not only on your first book do you have to come up with the cover, then by the second, you have to realize I should sort of have a feeling. So when you see these two books side by side, you get the sense they're probably the same author and you're going to get the same kind of book. So you also have to think
Right, they
about
kind of
going
blend
forward.
together. Right.
It's similar colors. They're both parts of a woman, but not all of her. You can't see either of their
Can't see her
faces.
face.
You can tell it's about
Similar
a woman
font.
going on a journey. Yeah, it's exactly similar font. Not right. So
There's
that's something you have to think
fluidity in both books.
Right.
That's kind of your style now, or your brand.
Your brand,
So
perfect.
that's when it comes in too, wherein, having open communication about what is your brand, Deb. In the future, if you create another book, would it feel similar to, the look of it and your style, would it match the other books? Right? Like Nicholas Sparks, for example, a Nicholas Sparks book from afar, and it is who you are as a writer, and it's your personal brand.
And
Right.
that's important
That's a really good
because your
point.
cover is meant to draw them in. It's the
Yeah.
very first thing they see. It's the most, in a way.
It's your first impression.
Right. You could almost say it's more important than the writing. And now I don't mean that, but it's the cover is what's going to make them pick it up and
Exactly.
find. So the three things are the cover, the price, and the blurb on the back.
And the blurb on the
Those are
back.
considered the three most important things written initially.
Melissa, before we go, where can people find you?
Well, my website.
Yeah.
They can just send me an email through my website if they are interested in some of my freelance work. And for boudoir photography as well, if they're interested, and I'm happy to meet them, get to know them, and work together in whether it's visual artist type of way or photography. Yeah.
That's great.
What is your website?
It's Melissa, Melissa, Luella, Luella.com.
I highly recommend people check it out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We
That's great.
actually have a blog of Deb there.
I saw that last night. I checked that out. So, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us. And again, beautiful cover for Deb. And we hope, we'll send people your way because you do great work.
Yes, I wonder, does that mean Mandra's on her way?
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
I know Shelly would do it.
Shelly might go first.
Yes.
I'll put Shelly first.
Okay.
You'll love Shelly. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to the Studio 21 podcast. To the Writer's Block here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. Be sure to check us out at the Writer's Block NH Facebook and on your favorite podcast catcher. If you'd like to hear this episode again or share it with a friend, head to the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. That's UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. You can find this podcast and the vodcast video on demand in case you want to watch it. Find this episode and all previous episodes on the United Podcast Network TV, and please subscribe. Thank you for joining us. May you be inspired, feel empowered, and be well.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.